Hello again, and welcome back to another episode of the Longevity Lab MD podcast. In this week's podcast, we explore longevity through the lens of Peter Attia, diving into his key ideas on health and long-term well-being. I'm joined once again by Dr. Ari. Thanks for being here with us today.
Well, thanks for having me back. Always a pleasure to be here and dive deeper into all things longevity.
Okay, so let's dive in. We all want more time, don't we?
Right.
Like more years. But maybe what we really want deep down is more time, feeling well.
Yeah, exactly. Staying active,
Yeah.
being able to do the stuff we love.
Sharing moments, not being sort of held back by illness, that Healthspan idea.
That's absolutely right. And that's what we're unpacking today, the work of Dr. Peter Attia, who is a well-known physician really focused on using science to help us figure out how to live longer, sure, but also how to live better during those years.
Right. So we've dug into his stuff, his podcast, the book Outlive.
Yeah, trying to get the foundations of how he thinks about this. And he's super clear. This isn't about like living forever.
Not immortality.
No, not at all. It's more about adding, maybe a decade, maybe a bit more to your total life. But the real focus, the relentless focus is on bumping up your health span.
And he draws a line there, doesn't he? Between lifespan, just the total number of years, and health span. How many of those years are you actually healthy, active, without major chronic disease?
Yeah, and he argues pretty convincingly, I think, that if you really zero in on maximizing that health span, you kind of naturally capture maybe 3/4 of the benefit towards a longer life anyway.
That makes sense, like quasi an effect almost.
It's a powerful way to frame it. He uses that old Greek mythology, Tithonus.
Oh yeah, the guy who got immortality but forgot to ask for eternal youth.
That's the one. So he just lived on and on, getting older, more frail, suffering. It's a stark reminder, isn't it? You don't just want more years, you want more life in those years.
Absolutely. So how did we get here? Why do we need this specific focus now? Attia kind of traces the history of medicine, right?
He does. He talks about these phases. Medicine 1.0, that was basically most of human history up until like the late 1800s, based mostly on beliefs, gut feelings, frankly not very effective.
Okay.
Average lifespan was maybe late 30s, early 40s.
Wow.
Yeah, and people died mainly from infections, childbirth, accidents, that kind of thing.
Then came medicine 2.0. This is the big shift.
Huge shift. Late 19th century onwards, you get the scientific method really taking hold in medicine, germ theory, antibiotics, sanitation, all of it.
Vaccines.
Absolutely revolutionary. Medicine 2.0 basically doubled human lifespan in about 100 years. It's fantastic for acute problems, infections, trauma, sudden illness. You get hit by a car, you want medicine 2.0 stat.
Definitely. But lifespan gains have kind of stalled out recently, haven't they?
They have, and that's because medicine 2.0, for all its amazing success, isn't really designed to tackle the main killers today, which are chronic diseases.
Right. Heart disease, cancer, diabetes.
Exactly, and that's where the need for medicine 3.0 comes in. It's not about replacing 2.0. We still need that emergency care, of course.
Of course.
But it's about shifting the focus, the resources towards prevention of chronic disease, acting early, being aggressive about risk reduction, tailoring things to the individual, using the best science we have.
So the goal is basically to need medicine 2.0 less often and much later in life.
That's the idea. Make those encounters with acute care less frequent, less severe, and push them way, way down the timeline.
Okay, so what are these big chronic threats that medicine 3.0 is really gunning for? Adi has a name for them.
He does, yeah. He calls them the 4 Horsemen of Death. Kind of dramatic, but memorable.
It sticks. Okay, what are they?
First up, atherosclerotic diseases, ASCVD, basically diseases of the blood vessels, heart and brain. Think heart attacks, strokes.
And prevention focuses on
A lot on metabolic health, managing cholesterol, blood pressure, blood sugar. Okay, Horseman number 1. Number 2, as you guessed, it's cancer, obviously complex, influenced by genes, environment, smoking. but he really highlights the link between obesity and cancer risk, possibly through inflammation and certain growth factors.
So, metabolic health links in again.
It does. And for cancer, early and aggressive screening becomes a really critical strategy, though he does acknowledge there's sometimes just, bad luck involved with random mutations.
This is quite interesting. Okay, so what's the third one?
Okay, yeah, the third horseman, neurodegenerative diseases. Things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. For many people, avoiding these is the top priority.
Of course. Understandably.
You see, when it comes to building up cognitive reserve, maintaining physical function that helps build resilience, in all that, genetics play a role, and again, metabolic health seems to be a factor too.
Okay, and the fourth?
Metabolic diseases themselves. This is mainly stuff driven by overnutrition, so insulin resistance, fatty liver disease, type 2 diabetes. Now, these might not be the direct top cause of death on their own, but Attia calls them like gasoline on the fire. They dramatically increase your risk for the other three horsemen.
Gotcha, so they're like an accelerant.
Exactly. And the key takeaway with Medicine 3.0 is this proactive approach. It's not waiting until you have heart disease or full-blown diabetes. It's about spotting the risks maybe decades earlier and intervening then.
That makes a lot of sense. Hearing about prevention decades out. What if someone listening is, say, in their 50s, 60s, 70s? Is it just too late? Did they miss the boat?
That is such a common question, and it's totally understandable. Attia uses this analogy like a car driving towards a cliff edge.
Right.
Obviously, it's easier to slow down, to change direction when you're still far away from the edge. You've got more time, more room to maneuver.
Okay.
But
Makes
even
sense.
if you're quite close to that edge, hitting the brakes, steering away, it's still way, way better than just driving straight off, right?
Taking action still helps. So there's still hope, basically. You can still make improvements.
Absolutely. This is what Attia believes in. And there's data showing people starting significant lifestyle changes even in their 70s see real improvements in their function and health into their 80s.
That's encouraging.
Yeah, you might need to adjust, of course. Start slower, be careful about injuries, manage existing conditions, but the potential to improve your health span is still there. It's definitely not too late.
Okay, good to hear. So, if the goal is preventing those horsemen living well longer, what are the practical tools? Attia talks about these 5 pillars, right?
That's right. He organizes his strategy around 5 main areas or buckets, as he sometimes calls them. There's exercise, nutrition, sleep, pharmacology, and emotional health.
5 key areas.
Yeah, he mentions there could be a sort of catch-all 6th category. Toxins, accidents, stuff like that. But the real core focus is those 5.
And I get the sense one of those stands out for him.
Oh, definitely. Exercise, he's on record saying it's probably the single most potent intervention we have, like the best drug for both lifespan and health span. He thinks its impact might be greater than any other single thing, with the possible exception
More than anything else.
maybe of emotional health in some extreme cases, but exercise is huge for him.
So how does he think about exercise? Is it just go run or lift weights?
It's much more structured than that. He uses this really cool framework called the Centenarian Decathlon.
Centenarian Decathlon. Okay, tell me more.
The idea is you think about your final decade of life, what he calls your marginal decade, and you define very specifically what physical tasks you want to be able to do then.
Like what kind of tasks?
Concrete things like being able to pick up a grandchild or hoist your own suitcase into the overhead bin on a plane. Simple tasks like that. Maybe hike a certain trail you love, or just simply get up off the floor without assistance.
So you're training for specific life activities.
Exactly. It makes the goal incredibly tangible and easier to imagine. Basically, you define those 10 or so activities you want to compete in during your last decade, then you work backward.
Work backwards how?
You figure out, given the natural decline that happens with age, how strong, how stable, how aerobically fit do I need to be now to still be able to do those things then?
So it creates a clear training target for today.
Precisely. It helps to find what you need in terms of Stability, strength, aerobic capacity. He talks a lot about zone 2 training, that steady all-day pace.
Right.
And also anaerobic capacity, your peak power, your VO2 max, kind of like the size of your engine.
Right. So it's not weights versus cardio, it's both.
Absolutely. He stresses that. It's like asking if you need food or water. Of course, you need both. Strength training is critical, especially for fighting off sarcopenia, that accelerated muscle loss, especially after 75 or so. So obviously, building that strength reserve now is crucial.
What about someone who's just starting out, like literally doing nothing right now? Where do they begin?
That's where the behavioral side is key. He emphasizes on that quite a lot. And based on solid research, the study on vigorous intermittent lifestyle physical activity, VILPA, published in Nature Medicine in December 2022, the benefits start the moment you do anything more than zero. Meaning, a 5-minute walk is a win if you weren't walking before.
Right.
The focus initially is just participation. Building the habit. Start small. Make it easy to succeed.
Make it easy. How?
He talks about reducing the activation energy, which means make it as frictionless as possible to start.
I see.
Maybe for someone that's like setting up a simple home gym, or like always choosing hotels with decent gyms when you travel. Basically, make the healthy choice the easy choice.
Well, that's the hope.
Environment matters too, especially for stopping bad habits like keeping junk food out of the house.
Look at Pillar 1, exercise. Huge. What about Pillar 2, nutrition? That feels complicated.
Yeah, Attia himself calls nutrition probably the messiest pillar to study scientifically. There are so many variables.
So no magic diet.
Definitely not. He's very clear. There isn't one single perfect diet for everyone.
I see.
His whole approach is less about what specific diet and more about teaching you how to think about food based on your own goals, your metabolism, your needs.
But are there any bedrock principles, things he's really confident about?
2 main ones, yeah. First is energy balance, total calories in versus calories out. That's the first order determinant as he puts it.
So calories matter most.
They're the biggest lever, yes. Now, quality absolutely matters. 1,000 calories of donuts is obviously not the same as 1,000 calories of salmon and veggies, but the hard truth is most people in developed nations, maybe 70%, are simply overnourished, eating too many calories overall.
Okay, energy balance. What's the second principle?
Protein. He calls it the least flexible macronutrient, meaning your body has pretty fixed needs for it, especially for maintaining muscle.
That gets more important as you age.
Critically important. We develop something called anabolic resistance as we get older, which means our muscles need more protein stimulation just to maintain themselves, let alone grow.
So the standard recommendations might not be enough.
The RDA, or recommended dietary allowance, which is the 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. He argues that's basically the minimum to prevent deficiency just to stay alive. It's not optimal for thriving, for holding on to muscle mass as you age.
So what does he aim for?
His minimum target is usually double the RDA, around 1.6 grams per kilogram. And for active people, maybe even higher, up to 2.2 grams per kilograms. He points out low protein in the elderly is strongly linked to bad outcomes like frailty and falls.
Okay, energy balance and protein. If someone does need to reduce calories, what strategies does he talk about?
He lays out 3 main levers you can pull. First, just direct caloric restriction, eating less of everything, tracking calories or portions, flexible in what you eat but needs discipline. Second, dietary restriction, cutting out whole categories of food like carbs, keto, or fat, or specific types of foods. The more you restrict, generally the more effective it is for weight loss. But sustainability can be tough, and it depends a lot on your individual response.
And the third?
Time restriction, intermittent fasting, limiting your eating to a specific window each day, say 8 hours.
Is fasting a big focus for him?
He sees it as a tool, but not necessarily a magic bullet. He cautions that it can backfire if you're not careful. You can still overeat in your window, or crucially, you might struggle to get enough protein in that shorter time frame.
Potentially leading to muscle loss.
Exactly, which undermines the longevity goal. So he often uses fasting more strategically, maybe for people with significant metabolic issues, but always emphasizes hitting that protein target.
What about the types of food to generally avoid? You mentioned the standard American diet.
Yeah, he's pretty blunt about needing to cut out the main offenders. Added sugars, especially fructose, refined grains, and highly processed seed oils. He thinks these things, in the quantities most people eat them, are incredibly damaging.
Any simple rules of thumb?
Well, a common one he suggests is shopping mostly around the perimeter of the grocery store. That's usually where the whole foods are, like produce, meat, fish, dairy. Avoid the middle aisles packed with processed stuff.
Any specific things to definitely ditch?
Sugary drinks are high on his list. Sodas, juices. They deliver a massive fructose load way too quickly. Eating whole fruit is much better. The fiber and water slow things down, but he's also quick to say not all processed food is evil. Cheese is processed, yogurt is processed, but they can be fine.
How about personalizing this?
Yeah.
Making it work for the individual.
Tools like continuous glucose monitors, CGMs, are something he finds valuable.
Those patches that track blood sugar.
Exactly. Even for people without diabetes, wearing one for a few months can be incredibly insightful. You see in real time how your body reacts to different carbs, different meals. It helps you learn how to keep your blood sugar more stable, which is a big plus for metabolic health.
Interesting. Okay, one last nutrition point. Alcohol. What's the verdict?
From a pure health and longevity standpoint, his view is pretty clear. Less is unequivocally better. He frames it as purely a hedonistic pleasure that needs careful management.
Why so negative?
Several reasons. Empty calories, it can slow down fat burning, often leads to mindless eating alongside it. It's a known carcinogen, and there are links to Alzheimer's risk as well.
But what about that old idea that moderate drinking is good for your heart?
Yeah, that's debated, and the data is messy. But looking at the totality of evidence, Attia concludes it's a net negative for longevity if you do drink. His advice is basically be mindful, set strict limits, like maybe fewer than 7 drinks a week total, and no more than 2 on any single day.
Okay, clear enough. Let's shift to the third pillar, sleep. This feels like it's getting more attention generally these days.
It really is. With all the wearables like Whoop and Oura rings, or even your Apple Watch, you have massive data. Attia stresses it's absolutely vital. The data is, as I said, is just overwhelming now. Even one night of bad sleep messes with your cognitive function, your physical performance, your insulin sensitivity.
Impacts everything.
Pretty much, and is dose dependent. Even chronically sleeping just a bit less than you need has negative consequences. That old mindset of, I'll sleep when I'm dead, well, probably just means you'll be dead sooner.
Right. A wake-up call, ironically.
Exactly. The good news, though, is that unlike some other health issues, a lot of sleep problems are really responsive to behavioral changes.
Okay, so what are the top tips? The quick version for better sleep.
All right, the elevator pitch. Consistency is king. Same bedtime, same wake time, every day. Yes,
okay.
Even weekends, as much as possible. Allow enough time in bed, usually around 8 hours, for most adults to get 7-8 hours of actual sleep.
Okay.
Environment. Make it dark, make it quiet, make it cool. Really cool.
Dark, quiet, cool. Got it.
And then detachment. This is crucial. Wind down for maybe 2 hours before bed. No stimulating stuff or anything like work emails, stressful news, social media arguments. Avoid them before bedtime.
Is it the blue light from screens?
The light is part of it, but he argues the information itself, the mental stimulation or aggravation, is often worse. He even suggests maybe having a separate dumb phone or device just for relaxing things like reading or listening to music in the evening.
Interesting. Anything else?
Yeah, avoid eating large meals or drinking alcohol within about 3 hours of bedtime. Both can disrupt sleep architecture.
Those seem like solid, actionable steps. Any common pitfalls?
That weekend shift in schedule, social jet lag, that really messes people up. It's like giving yourself jet lag every single week.
Yeah, I feel that.
And for some people, especially older adults, just quieting the mind, detaching from worries can be really hard. But he emphasizes that if these behavioral things aren't enough, there's professional help, like sleep doctors or cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which is very effective.
Good to know there are options. Pillar 4 was pharmacology.
Right. This is basically using medications or supplements as tools to help optimize health and longevity. It's definitely part of his toolkit.
But not the main part.
No, definitely not a replacement for the lifestyle pillars. It's seen as an adjunct, something to consider strategically once the foundations of exercise, nutrition, and sleep are solid.
Got it. And that brings us to the 5th pillar, emotional health.
Yes, and this one is huge. Attia argues it might actually be the most important pillar of all.
More important than exercise or diet.
Potentially, yes. Because if your emotional health is in shambles, if you're deeply unhappy or constantly stressed, it can completely sabotage all your other efforts. What's the point of living longer if you're miserable?
That's a fair point. Does emotional health decline with age like physical stuff can?
Interestingly, not necessarily. Unlike, say, muscle mass or VO2 max, which tend to decline without effort, things like happiness, connection, relationship quality, they can actually improve with age.
So it's something you can actively work on and improve over time.
Absolutely. He really emphasizes this. He talks about it like modifying your software. It's not fixed, and he kind of poses it logically. Why would you choose to be unhappy if you have tools to work with?
Okay. What kind of tools or strategies does he mention?
Therapy is a big one. He's an advocate for ongoing therapy, basically not just waiting for a crisis. Then journaling comes up as a way to process thoughts, also spending time outdoors. He personally finds rucking, which is walking with a weighted pack, very beneficial for his mental state.
How do you even know if this is an area you need to focus on?
Well, he talks about learning to recognize your own yellow light behaviors, those little warning signs that things aren't quite right internally before you get to a full-blown meltdown or burnout.
Like warning signs?
Yes, and reframing negative emotions, things like dysthymia, which is that low-grade chronic unhappiness or anhedonia, the loss of pleasure. Instead of seeing them as just awful, view them as signals. Often they signal a disconnect between what you're doing and what you truly value.
Can you give an example?
Sure, for example, maybe you realize you're constantly irritable with yourself. The signal isn't just, I'm a jerk. The signal might be that you're overworking and neglecting relationships, which conflicts with your core value of being a present partner or parent. Recognizing that disconnect helps you address the root cause factor. He also brings up related ideas like understanding your relationship with addiction. What are you addicted to? Is it serving you? Getting clear on your values? Like, what do you want people to say about you at your funeral? That helps guide choices and the constant struggle of balancing work, purpose, family, and personal life. He's very open about his own challenges here, especially having young kids and realizing that family is his deepest source of pride.
That's very relatable. It sounds like deep, ongoing work.
It is. And he also mentions the importance of trying to insulate yourself from external validation or criticism, like deciding not to read online comments, for example, focusing on your own internal compass.
Wow. Okay, that covers the 5 pillars. It all feels very integrated. Maybe we can look at a real-world example. These new weight loss drugs, the GLP-1s like Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, they're everywhere. How does Attia view those through this longevity lens?
Yeah, that's a great current example he has discussed quite a bit. He definitely sees their potential and significance. I mean, given the epidemic of overweight and obesity and the massive healthcare costs tied to that, who wouldn't?
They could be game changers.
They could be, and there's intriguing research suggesting they might do more than just curb the appetite, maybe impacting brain pathways related to craving and pleasure too.
But knowing his framework, I bet there are caveats.
Oh, Absolutely. He always emphasizes there's no such a thing as free lunch. First big issue, cost. These drugs are incredibly expensive right now. We're talking $16,000 a year per consumer or more in the US.
Whoa.
So there are huge questions about affordability, access, and whether any healthcare system could even sustain prescribing these to the large percentage of the population who could potentially benefit.
That's a massive hurdle. Any other concerns?
Definitely, we still need more long-term safety data, decades of used data really. There are no side effects like some people experience an increased heart rate, which is, generally not the direction you want your heart rate going for longevity, right? Now, that risk might be outweighed by the benefits of losing significant weight if someone is severely obese, but it's a trade-off. Also, the weight tends to come back when people stop the drug, implying potentially lifelong use is needed.
So dependency is a factor.
It seems so.
I see.
And that potential effect on pleasure regulation reward pathways, that's something he flags as needing much more careful study. We don't fully understand the long-term implications there.
So it's a classic Attia approach. Look at the potential, yes, but also rigorously examine the costs, the trade-offs, the unknowns, the need for more data before jumping on the bandwagon.
Exactly. It's a perfect illustration of that critical evidence-based medicine 3.0 thinking applied to a new intervention.
Okay, this has been incredibly comprehensive. We've covered Attia's whole philosophy, from Medicine 3.0, the 4 Horsemen, down to the 5 pillars: exercise, nutrition, sleep, pharmacology, and that crucial emotional health piece.
Yeah,
It's a lot to take in. Could feel pretty overwhelming for someone just starting.
for sure. And Attia totally gets that. His advice for newcomers is really straightforward. Don't try to boil the ocean. Don't try to fix everything at once.
Just pick one thing.
Pretty much. Pick one pillar, maybe the one that resonates with you the most, or honestly, the one where you feel like you can actually make a small change and get a win, or build some momentum. It's not a race. It's about building habits that stick.
And like we said, there's so much more detail out there on each of these pillars if you want to go deeper. Specific exercise protocols, nutrition science nuances, sleep hacks, mental health strategies.
Absolutely. This deep dive and our podcast is really about giving you the map, the framework Attia uses. Each destination on that map, to be honest, could be its own journey.
So for everyone listening, the big takeaway really seems to be that longevity isn't just about tacking on extra years at the end. It's about fundamentally improving the quality, the vitality, the life within all your years, starting now.
Exactly. So maybe think about which of these pillars feels like the right starting point for you, or perhaps consider how your actions today align with your deeper values. Like we discussed with emotional health, are you living in a way that supports the future you want?
And maybe even take a moment to sketch out your own Centenarian Decathlon. What does that vibrant, capable, marginal decade look like for you? Because the powerful thing is, taking even small, proactive steps today in just one area is how you actively shape that future. That's how you ensure those later years are full of life. Thank you again for tuning in, folks, and see you next week.